The cold water numbed my arthritic fingers as I scrubbed the crystal wine glass. Savannah snatched the towel from my hand, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my wrist. "Stop touching my kitchen." She laughed for her live stream audience, shoving me toward the shadows. I swallowed the rage burning in my throat. She sees a 63-year-old burden. She does not know I still hold the one signature that can turn this $1 million house back into dust. My name is Eleanor Briggs, and at 63 years old, I have learned that invisibility is not a superpower. It is a sentence. I stood over the deep farmhouse sink, the water running lukewarm over my arthritic knuckles. The overhead LED lights hummed with a clinical, white brightness that made the veins in my hands look like blue rivers on a topographical map of a dying country. The air smelled of burnt Arabica beans from the $1,000 espresso machine and the cloying, chemical sweetness of Savannah's perfume. From the living room, the digital chime of social media notifications pinged incessantly, like a heart monitor speeding up. I focused on scrubbing a crystal wine glass, terrified that my grip might slip. A hand with manicured nails, painted the color of dried blood, snatched the drying towel from my grasp. Savannah stood there. Her teeth were white enough to blind a man, and her smile did not reach her eyes. She held her phone in one hand, recording, always recording. "This is my kitchen." "Mom," she said, her voice dripping with that fake southern sweetness that curdled milk. "Please, stop touching it." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her about the blisters I popped while hammering drywall in 90-degree heat so Mark could have the deposit for this monstrosity. I wanted to scream that every tile under her designer heels was paid for by my sweat and the insurance money from Thomas's death. Instead, I tucked my trembling hands into the pockets of my oversized cardigan. I backed away until my spine hit the cold plaster of the wall. I made myself small, just another outdated appliance she wanted to upgrade. Savannah tapped her screen, the ring light flaring up like an interrogation lamp. She hip-checked me toward the pantry, shoving me out of the frame. "Hey guys, happy Tuesday." She chirped at the camera lens, just doing a little prep. You know how it is. Boundaries are so important, right? Some older folks just don't understand personal space. I watched the hearts float up her screen. Thousands of strangers laughing at the vague, blurry shape of an old woman in the background. I shuffled backward, trying to retreat to the safety of the guest room. That was when I saw it. The floor by the kitchen island gleamed with an unnatural sheen. It was not water. It was the lemon oil polish, the kind meant for wood furniture, slicked across the travertine tile. I looked up at the magnetic knife strip. The heavy chef's knife was turned outward. The blade faced the walkway, not the wall. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. This was not carelessness. Mark breezed into the room. My son. The boy I raised on macaroni and courage. He adjusted his silk tie, checking his reflection in the oven door. He saw me pressed against the wall. He saw his wife filming. "Mark," I started, my voice cracking. He did not look me in the eye. He grabbed a protein bar from the bowl. "Mom, please, don't make Savannah uncomfortable. I have a merger meeting in 2 hours. I have too much to deal with right now." He walked out. He left me there. I took a step toward the sink to turn off the dripping tap. My orthopedic shoe hit the oil patch. My foot slid out violently. My arms windmilled. I grabbed the edge of the granite island just in time, my shoulder wrenching with a sickening pop as I caught my weight. I gasped for air, clutching my chest. Savannah did not drop her phone. She did not reach out. She just stared at me, the camera lens looking like a black, unblinking eye. "I told you not to come into the kitchen," she said. Her voice was flat, dead. "You never listen." She turned her back to me to check her engagement statistics. I gripped the cold stone of the counter, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at the back of her head. I realized then that she was not just annoyed. She was calculating. She was measuring the distance from the slippery floor to the emergency room. I looked around the room. The wolf range, the sub-zero fridge, the quartz island. Perfect. Pristine. Deadly. "They think this is their kitchen," I thought, steadying my breathing as the pain radiated down my arm. "They think they own the walls. They forget who paid the first debt on this house." I retreated to the sanctuary of the guest room and sat on the edge of the mattress that was too soft for my bad back. The pain in my shoulder was throbbing in time with my heartbeat, pulling me down into the heavy waters of memory. I closed my eyes, and the smell of Savannah's expensive candles vanished, replaced by the scent of ammonia and stale office coffee. I was back at Nova Ledger Solutions. I was 40 years old again. It was 2 a.m, and my knees were wet from kneeling on the industrial carpet, scrubbing a coffee stain that some junior analyst had left behind. I worked the night shift cleaning those offices so I could pay for Thomas's heart medication and keep Mark in that fancy state university. I remembered the night I sat at the break room table, my hands smelling of bleach, and signed the papers to mortgage our little wooden house in Milford. It was a terrifying amount of money. Mark had called it seed capital. He needed it for his first startup, the one that eventually morphed into the financial technology empire that bought him his Italian suits. "I promise." "Mom," he had said, his young voice shaking with excitement. "I will pay it back 10 times over." I looked at the photo of Thomas on my bedside table here in this cold mansion. My husband had been a mechanic with grease permanently etched into his fingerprints. He used to hug me from behind while I stirred stew in our tiny, drafty kitchen. "Ellie, home is where the stove is hot," he would whisper against my neck. "One day, I'm going to build you a kitchen where the oven doesn't rattle." Thomas never got to build that kitchen. A massive heart attack took him 3 years after I signed those loan papers. I was left alone to service the debt. I watched from a distance as Mark sold his app for millions. I read about his success in the newspapers while I was selling our furniture to pay the rising interest rates. When the bank finally foreclosed on the Milford house, I did not tell Mark. He was busy. He was important. That was when he showed up in his black sedan. "Come live with us at Brookhaven Heights." He had offered. It makes sense. We have the space and, well, Savannah is pregnant. It would be good for your image. I mean, good for the family. I thought he wanted his mother. I realized too late that he wanted a live-in nanny who did not require a paycheck and a prop to show the shareholders that he was a family man. The transition was subtle, but brutal. When I first arrived, I walked into that gleaming kitchen with tears in my eyes, thinking of Thomas. I reached out to open the spice cabinet, wanting to make Mark his favorite pot roast. That was when I saw the label maker tape, Savannah's organic spices, Savannah's baking tools, Savannah's towels. Every inch of the room was branded. It was not a home. It was a territory. The rules followed shortly after. Dinner was at 6 o'clock sharp. No heavy smells, no frying, no noise before 9 in the morning. "Eleanor, darling." Savannah had said one morning, handing me a small, cheap microwave. "We set up a little station for you in the garage, just so you can heat up your tea without, you know, cluttering the counters." So I ate my lunches on a folding chair next to the lawnmower, smelling gasoline instead of basil. I tried to ask Mark about the house papers once. I wanted to know if he had ever paid off that original loan I took out, the one that started his entire career. "Mom, please." He had sighed, looking at his watch. "Finance is complicated. You wouldn't understand the structures. Don't worry about it." But I did worry, especially when the cameras appeared. Small, blinking eyes in the hallway, the living room, and pointing directly at the door to my room. Savannah claimed they were for the baby's security, yet the lens in the kitchen was angled specifically to capture the refrigerator and the sink. They were watching me. I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had scrubbed floors at Nova Ledger so Mark could learn to code. I gave everything to him. I whispered to the empty room. House. Money. My signature. Just because I thought he was my blood. Now, I realized the bitter truth. I was living on the charity of people who viewed me as nothing more than a piece of old, scratched furniture that clashed with their modern decor. They were waiting for me to break so they could finally throw me out. The atmosphere in the house shifted from cold neglect to active hostility, thick enough to choke on. It started with the live streams. Savannah launched a new series called Cooking with Chaos, and I realized with a sinking heart that I was the chaos. She would set up her tripod in the center of the kitchen, her voice bright and theatrical as she chopped vegetables. "You have to be so careful with aging parents in the house," she whispered to her phone, pulling a sad face. "Yesterday, Mom dropped a whole tray of lasagna, glass everywhere. It is exhausting trying to keep the baby safe." I stood in the hallway, gripping the doorframe. I had not touched a lasagna tray in 3 years. I had not broken a glass since 1998. But her followers sent waves of sympathy emojis, calling me a hazard. Then came the specialist. Mark brought him in on a Tuesday morning, a man with a clipboard and a smile that looked like it was purchased at a discount. He sat me down in the living room while Savannah hovered nearby with her phone recording audio. "Just a routine assessment. Mrs. Briggs," the man said. "Now, count backward from 100 by sevens. Quickly." I hesitated, trying to do the math. "She is struggling," Savannah whispered loudly. "I am not struggling." I snapped. "It is 93, 86. Okay. No need to get agitated," the man said, making a sharp check mark on his paper. Aggression is a common symptom. They were writing a narrative, page by page, in which I was losing my mind. That night, I woke up thirsty. As I crept toward the kitchen, I heard low voices drifting from the study. I pressed my ear against the cold wood of the door. Sunset Pines has a waiting list. Mark. Savannah was saying, "But if we move her assets now, we can restructure the insurance policies. We need that liquidity for the renovation loan." "I feel bad," Mark muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "She is my mother. She is a liability," Savannah hissed. "Do you want to lose this house? Because the bank is calling me now. We need full control. Sign the papers, or we are all out on the street." 2 days later. Savannah cornered me in the sunroom. She placed a stack of crisp, white documents on the coffee table. "Mom, these are just some updates for your medical insurance," she said, offering me a heavy gold pen. Just standard stuff to make sure you are covered if you get sick. Sign at the yellow tabs. I picked up the pen, my hand trembling slightly. I looked at the dense legal text, buried in a paragraph about medical necessity. I saw the phrase durable power of attorney and revocation of prior wills. I froze. My instinct, honed by years of reading fine print on loan documents to keep my family afloat, kicked in. I set the pen down. I need to read this first, I said softly. Savannah's smile twitched. Mom, don't be difficult. It is just insurance. Do you not trust me? Mark stepped into the room, loosening his tie. Just sign it, Mom. Savannah is trying to help you. Why do you have to make everything a fight I am not fighting? I said, pushing the papers away. I am reading. I will not sign today. The mask slipped from Savannah's face. Her eyes went dark, devoid of light. She snatched the papers from the table so hard the paper made a snapping sound. Fine, she spat. Do it the hard way. After that, the mail stopped coming for me. I knew the bank statements were arriving, but the mailbox was always empty when I checked. When I asked Mark, he waved a hand and said, "It is just junk mail." Mom, I threw it out for you. Then came the night of the gas. It was 3 a.m. when the smell woke me. Heavy. Rotten eggs. I sat up, my heart pounding, and hurried down the stairs. The kitchen was dark, but the smell was overpowering. I rushed to the stove. 3 burners were turned all the way to the high position, hissing deadly gas into the silence. There was no flame. I reached out and twisted the knobs off, my hands shaking violently. Suddenly, the overhead lights blazed on. I squinted, blinded. Savannah was standing in the doorway. She was fully dressed in her silk robe, her hair perfectly brushed. She did not look sleepy. Oh my God. She gasped, bringing a hand to her mouth. Mum, you left the gas on again. You are going to kill us all. I didn't. I stammered, backing away from the stove. I haven't cooked in weeks. You don't let me cook. See, she said, turning to Mark, who had appeared behind her, looking grim. She doesn't even remember doing it. It is the dementia. Mark. Next time, she will light a match. I looked at the stove. I looked at Savannah. I realized with a jolt of cold terror that this was not just about money anymore. They were building a case for negligence. Or worse, they were setting the stage for a tragedy. An old woman, confused, a gas leak, a spark. It would be so clean, so easy. I retreated to my room and locked the door, jamming a chair under the handle. I stood before the full-length mirror in the corner. My grey hair was messy, my face lined with deep wrinkles, my shoulder throbbing in its sling. But as I looked closer, I saw the eyes of the woman who had worked double shifts and outsmarted loan sharks. They think I have no teeth left to bite back. I whispered to my reflection. Perhaps they will be very surprised. The house buzzed with the frenetic energy of a television production. Savannah had invited a local lifestyle channel to film a segment titled The Millionaire's Wife's Kitchen, conveniently scheduling it for a Tuesday afternoon when Mark was in the city for meetings. Before the crew arrived, she had practically shoved me toward the staircase, her nails digging into my arm. "Stay upstairs," she had hissed, her breath smelling of mints and aggression. "Do not come down. Do not embarrass me. I need this to be perfect." I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter and the clinking of ceramic drifting up from the foyer. I smelled the rich, heavy scent of caramelized sugar and browned butter. But underneath the sweetness, there was something else. Sharp. Acrid. It was the smell of melting plastic, hot and chemical. Panic flared in my chest. After the gas incident, my nerves were frayed wires. I opened my bedroom door. A thin wisp of grey smoke was curling up the banister. Fire, I whispered. I moved to the landing. Below me. The kitchen island was a stage lit by blinding white umbrellas. Savannah was posing with a blowtorch and a creme brulee, smiling dazzlingly at a heavy camera mounted on a jib. I took a step down, then another. Savannah looked up. Her smile vanished instantly, replaced by a mask of exaggerated horror. "Oh my God!" she shrieked, her voice pitching up for the microphone. "Mom, what are you doing? The cameras are rolling." She moved toward the bottom of the stairs. I watched, as if in slow motion, as her right foot shot out. It was a subtle, practiced motion. She kicked a crumpled, oil-soaked cleaning rag from the shadow of the newel post directly onto the third step from the bottom. I saw it. But momentum is a cruel thing. My foot hit the rag. It was like stepping onto black ice. My leg shot out from under me. The world tilted violently sideways. I did not scream. I only gasped as gravity claimed me. I pitched forward, my arms flailing desperately. My right hand clawed at the air and found the mahogany handrail. I gripped it with every ounce of strength left in my 63-year-old body. Snap. My shoulder collided with the wall with a bone-jarring thud. I hung there, suspended in agony, my feet dangling over the marble floor below. In the chaos, the red tally light of the main camera blinked steadily. It had captured everything: the smile, the kick, the fall. Cut the feed. Savannah was screaming, not at me, but at the producer. She rushed over, but she did not touch me. She stood over my groaning form, her hands hovering uselessly. "Someone call 911. My mother-in-law She just fell. Her voice was trembling, but it was the tremble of a bad actress reading a script. The ambulance ride was a blur of siren wails and rattling metal. I lay strapped to the gurney, the vibration sending spikes of fire through my shoulder. She is lucky. I heard the paramedic murmur to the driver. If she hadn't caught that rail, she would have gone head first. That is a broken neck waiting to happen. The words hung in the sterile air like a diagnosis. A broken neck. That was the goal. At the hospital, the bright lights were merciless. The doctor confirmed a severe rotator cuff tear and deep bruising, but no fractures to the skull. I was moved to a recovery room, feeling small and bruised. A nurse named Rosa came in to check my vitals. She was a thick-set woman with kind eyes and hands that felt like warm sandpaper. She adjusted my IV drip, glancing at the curtain to make sure we were alone. "Honey," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You be careful in that big house. We see a lot of these stair accidents, especially with seniors who have a lot of equity in their property." She tapped the tablet at the end of my bed. "I shouldn't tell you this," Rosa murmured, her eyes darting to the door. "But your file was updated this morning. The contact for medical decisions isn't you anymore. It is listed as Mark Briggs. Guardian pending competency review." Cold dread washed over me, numbing me more than the painkillers. I had never signed that. I had refused the papers. "Thank you, Rosa," I said, my voice raspy. I lay back against the starch-stiff pillow and stared at the white acoustic tiles of the ceiling. The pain in my shoulder was sharp and real, a throbbing reminder of the hardwood stairs. But the real agony was in my chest. It was the crushing weight of clarity. They were not just waiting for nature to take its course. They were actively writing the ending. They had greased the floor. They had kicked the rag. They had updated the files. They have started counting down my time, I thought, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. And I am the only one who has not agreed to die yet. I returned to Brookhaven Heights with my arm in a heavy blue sling and a performance prepared in my mind. I walked with a stoop, letting my feet shuffle on the hardwood. I made sure my voice trembled when I spoke to them. I am so sorry to be such a burden, I whispered, keeping my eyes on the floor. Thank you for keeping me. Mark patted my good shoulder awkwardly, avoiding my gaze. Savannah just sighed, loud and long, but I saw her shoulders drop. They thought I was broken. They thought the fall had scared the fight out of me. They were wrong. It had only knocked the blinders off. That first night back, while the house slept, I sat in the glow of my old laptop. Rosa, the nurse, had scribbled instructions on a napkin for me. I navigated to the hospital patient portal. My fingers were slow, but my mind was racing. I found the section for legal documents. There it was, a durable power of attorney form, uploaded and active. At the bottom was a digital signature that read, Eleanor Briggs, dated 3 days before my fall. I had never seen that screen before. I kept clicking. I found a notification from an external insurer linked to my medical file. It was a life insurance policy, opened 2 months ago. The payout for natural death was modest, but there was a rider, an accidental death benefit, $2 million. The sole beneficiary was Mark. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. They were not just waiting for me to die. They were betting on it. The next morning, Savannah left early to film a commercial for a teeth-whitening kit. Mark was at the office. The house was silent. I walked to the central control panel in the kitchen. The iPad mounted on the wall that controlled the smart home features. I needed the password. I closed my eyes, remembering a week ago. I had been polishing the glass of the wine cabinet while Savannah tapped on this screen. I recalled the reflection of her fingers. Capital S, A, V, V, Y, capital Q. I typed it in. Savvy Queen 88. The screen unlocked. I navigated to the security camera archive. My heart hammered against my ribs as I scrolled back to the date of the accident. I found the file labeled Kitchen Cam 2, 14 hours. I pressed play. On the screen, grainy, but undeniable. I saw myself at the top of the stairs. I saw Savannah at the bottom. And then, clear as day, I saw her right foot shoot out. She kicked the oil-soaked rag directly onto the step I was about to take. Then, the performance? The fake scream? The delay in calling for help? I did not cry. I felt a cold, hard stone settle in my stomach. I kept scrolling. I found a clip from last month. Savannah cutting the strap of my heavy tote bag halfway through so it would snap when I lifted it. Another clip of her moving the ottoman into the dark hallway right before I usually went to the bathroom at night. I pulled a small USB drive from my pocket. It was an old one I had taken from a drawer in the study, one Mark thought was broken. I plugged it into the side of the panel and copied everything. An hour later, I was in a taxi, heading to the gritty side of the city. I met Lucas at a coffee shop that smelled of burnt beans. He was older now, the acne gone. but he still had the nervous energy of the kid I used to feed leftover sandwiches to at Nova Ledger. Mrs. Briggs, Lucas said, looking at my sling. You look hurt. I am waking up. Lucas, I said. I slid the USB drive across the table. I need this safe. Somewhere they cannot delete it. Somewhere they cannot find it. Lucas plugged it into his laptop. His eyes widened as he watched the footage of the stairs. He looked up at me, his face pale. Jesus. Mrs. Briggs, he whispered. This is attempted murder. Can you save it? I will put it on an encrypted cloud server, he said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I will make 3 mirrors. Even if they burn the house down, this video exists forever. You fed me when I was broke. Mrs. Briggs. I got you. He wrote down a name and address on a piece of paper. You need a shark, Lucas said. Go see her. She eats people like your son for breakfast. The name on the paper was Claire Morton. 2 hours later. I sat in a waiting room that smelled of old leather and expensive polish. My arm was still in a cast. I looked at the framed degrees on the wall. I was tired. I was in pain. But for the first time in years, I did not feel helpless. I clutched my purse with my good hand. Inside was the USB drive. The receptionist called my name. I stood up. I lifted my chin. I was not walking into this room to ask for mercy. I was walking in to authorize an airstrike. Claire Morton watched the video clip on her tablet for the 3rd time. She did not gasp. She did not look horrified. She looked like a shark that had just scented blood in the water. She paused the frame right at the moment Savannah's foot connected with the oily rag, then set the device down on her mahogany desk with a deliberate click. Mrs. Briggs, Claire said, her voice smooth and dangerously calm. You are not just a victim of domestic abuse. You are a creditor. And they have made a very distinct mistake in forgetting that. She opened the file folder I had brought, the one containing the yellowing, coffee-stained papers from 20 years ago. She pulled out the loan agreement I had typed up on a typewriter at the kitchen table in Milford. It was the contract for the seed money I had given Mark for his first startup. You see this clause? Claire asked, tapping a paragraph with a pen that probably cost more than my first car. It states that if the principal is not repaid in full, the lender retains a security interest in any asset purchased with the proceeds. Mark used your money to build the app. He sold the app to buy the Brookhaven house. He never formally repaid the principal. He just moved you in. I stared at the paper. I thought it was just family helping family. In the eyes of the law, that is a lien, Claire said. Technically, you own a piece of that house, and we are going to use it as a sledgehammer. She began sliding documents across the desk toward me. They were revocation forms, restraining orders, affidavits of competency. We are going to revoke the power of attorney immediately, she said, her eyes hard. We are going to freeze any transaction that involves your name or your social security number. We are going to file for emergency protection against guardianship. You need to sign these. Eleanor. Every single one. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from a strange, cold adrenaline. For years, my signature had been something they tried to steal or force out of me. Now, as I signed my name at the bottom of the revocation order, it felt like I was loading a weapon. Eleanor Briggs. Eleanor Briggs. With each stroke of ink, I was cutting the ropes they had tied around me. While I signed, Claire made a phone call. She spoke in legal codes, her tone professional but aggressive. She was contacting the bank that held the mortgage on the Brookhaven house to inquire about the lien status. She listened for a long time, her expression shifting from focused to amused. She hung up and looked at me. "Eleanor," she said softly, "did you know that Mark and Savannah are broke?" I blinked. "That is impossible. The cars, the clothes, the kitchen renovation. It is all debt," Claire said. "They have refinanced the house twice. They are upside down on the mortgage. They took out a second lien to pay for Savannah's failed lifestyle brand and Mark's bad crypto investments. The bank officer told me they have received a notice of default. If they do not pay the arrears in 6 months, the bank takes the house." The silence in the room was heavy. I thought of Savannah's sneering face, her lectures about my clumsiness, her obsession with her perfect kitchen. It was all a stage set built on quicksand. "So, they will lose it?" I asked. "They will," Claire said, leaning back in her leather chair. "Unless they get a sudden influx of cash. Like, say, a life insurance payout from an accidental death." The air left my lungs. It all made sense. They were not just greedy. They were desperate. "Here is what we are going to do," Claire said, leaning forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We do not stop the foreclosure. We let it happen. We let the bank take the house. And in the meantime, we set up a blind trust in your name. We pool your savings, your settlement money, and we get ready for what to buy it." Claire smiled, and it was the sharpest thing in the room. "When the bank auctions it off to recover their loss, you are going to be the highest bidder. You are going to buy your own house back. Eleanor." I walked out of her office 20 minutes later. My arm was still in a sling, and my shoulder still ached with a dull, rhythmic throb. But as I stepped onto the sidewalk and looked at the grey city skyline, I did not feel like a victim. I thought about the stairs. I thought about the oil. If they tried to push me down the stairs to keep that house, I thought, hailing a cab with my good arm, then the only fair punishment is for me to buy the stairs, the kitchen, and the roof, and then invite them to leave. Mark stormed through the front door like a hurricane in a cheap suit. He threw his leather briefcase onto the hallway console, knocking over a vase of white lilies. The water spilled across the floor. But he did not notice. His face was a mask of red, sweaty panic. "What did you do?" he screamed. Marching toward me where I sat in the living room, I tried to pay the caterer for the launch party and the card was declined. "The bank says the assets are frozen. What did you do with our money?" I looked up from my book, keeping my expression perfectly still. "Our money. That account holds the settlement from your father's accident and my pension. There is no us in that account. Mark. I manage it for you." He sputtered, veins bulging in his neck. "I need that liquidity. You are ruining everything." Before I could answer, Savannah walked in from the kitchen. She was not angry. She was wearing her sympathetic face, the one she used when asking for donations on Instagram. Behind her walked a man in a beige sweater, holding a notepad. "Mark, calm down," Savannah said softly, placing a hand on his arm. She turned to the stranger. "See, Dr. Evans? This is the stress we deal with. She gets confused about finances. She thinks people are stealing from her. It is paranoia. It was an ambush, a staged intervention to document my mental decline." I saw the red light of a phone propped up on the bookshelf, half hidden behind a decorative gourd. Dr. Evans stepped forward, smiling condescendingly. Mrs. Briggs. Hello? I am just here to chat. Savannah tells me you have been having some frightening thoughts lately. About the stairs, I closed my book and set it down. I did not shrink away. I did not cry. I looked Dr. Evans dead in the eye. I do not have thoughts, Doctor. I said clearly. I have evidence. I remember the smell of the unlit gas at 3 a.m. I remember the slide of the oil on the 3rd step. And I remember seeing my daughter-in-law's foot kick the rag that sent me to the hospital. Savannah gasped. A theatrical sound. Oh my God. Mark. See, she is hallucinating. And I continued, my voice hardening like steel. I have submitted the security camera footage to my lawyer, Claire Morton, and to the local police department. You can ask them about my paranoia. I pointed to the hidden phone on the shelf. And you can tell your camera to record this attempted murder is not a diagnosis you can medicate away. Mark went pale. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. You gave it to a lawyer, Dr. Evans stopped writing. He looked at Mark and Savannah, sensing the radioactive toxicity of the situation. I think this is a legal matter, not a clinical one. I cannot be involved in this. He backed out of the room so fast he nearly tripped over the wet rug in the hall. Savannah's face twisted. The mask fell off completely. She grabbed her phone and dialed 3 numbers. I am calling the police. She hissed. You are aggressive. You are dangerous. I will have you committed tonight. When the officers arrived 10 minutes later, Savannah met them at the door with tears streaming down her cheeks. She is threatening us. She sobbed. She is out of her mind. She needs to go to the psych ward for a 72-hour hold. I remained seated. When the officer approached me, wary and hand near his belt, I calmly handed him a manila envelope. Inside was a copy of the temporary restraining order application Claire had drafted, along with a notarized affidavit of competency from my own doctor. Dated yesterday. Officer, I said. This is a dispute regarding financial elder abuse. Here is the card of my attorney. Please feel free to call her. The officer read the papers. He looked at Savannah, who was still trying to squeeze out tears, and then back at me. Ma'am, the officer said to Savannah, his voice flat. This is a civil dispute. There are no grounds for an involuntary hold here. If you call us again without an emergency, I will cite you for misuse of emergency services. They left. Savannah stood in the hallway, her hands clenched into fists, realizing her weapon had just misfired. 2 days later, the letter from the bank arrived. It was on heavy, ominous paper. Mark opened it at the breakfast table, and I watched the colour drain from his face. It was the formal notice of default. The foreclosure clock had started ticking. Yet, that afternoon, Savannah posted a photo of herself drinking champagne. The caption read, "Big things coming. We are outgrowing this space-time for an upgrade. New chapter blessed." While she spun her web of lies, I went to the bank with Claire. I sat in a quiet office and signed the transfer orders. I moved 70% of my life savings, every cent Thomas had left me, into the blind trust. Are you sure about this? Eleanor Claire asked. I am sure, I said. That night, dinner was a silent, suffocating affair. The only sound was the scraping of silverware. Savannah suddenly slammed her fork down onto her plate. The porcelain chipped. When the bank takes this place, she spat, her eyes venomous. We are moving to a penthouse in the city, and you are not coming. I will not let you set one foot in my new kitchen." I took a slow sip of water. I looked at the walls of the dining room, knowing that in 30 days they would be up for auction. "Don't worry. Savannah," I said softly. "Next time. The kitchen will be mine." The whispers began at the Brookhaven Heights Preparatory School, a place where gossip travelled faster than a virus. A junior loan officer at the bank had accidentally CC'd the wrong parent on a foreclosure notice regarding our address. Within 3 hours, the rumour that the perfect Briggs family was insolvent had infected the entire neighbourhood. I sat in the living room, listening to Savannah scream into her phone. "How dare you?" she shrieked, her face a blotchy red map of rage. "We are not losing the house. Linda, we are. We are diversifying our portfolio. If you say another word, I will sue you for defamation." She slammed the phone down so hard the screen cracked. She did not notice her personal assistant, Haley, standing in the doorway holding a stack of unpaid bills. Haley was a 20-year-old girl who Savannah treated like a serf, constantly berating her for things like the wrong temperature of latte or the wrong shade of napkins. I saw Haley's eyes narrow as she looked at Savannah's back. The girl was tired. Later that afternoon, Haley sat at the dining table with Savannah's open laptop, while Savannah was upstairs throwing a tantrum. I watched from the hallway as Haley quickly pulled out her phone. She snapped 3 photos of the screen. An hour later, my burner phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an email forwarded to the secure account Lucas had set up. The subject line was simply, "You are not crazy." Attached were screenshots of wire transfers. Briggs Pension Fund to Savannah LLC, Caymans. They were moving my money into offshore accounts to hide it from the bankruptcy court. "They are using your name to play a big game." The text from the anonymous number read, "I forwarded everything to Claire immediately." By the next morning, Claire had used those screenshots to put the bank in a chokehold. She sat in a conference room with their legal team and laid it out plainly. The bank could either acknowledge I was a victim of financial identity theft and clear my name from the debt, or we would sue them for negligence for allowing these fraudulent transfers to happen under their watch. The bank, terrified of a PR nightmare, agreed. I was no longer a debtor. I was a protected party. Savannah, unaware that her assistant had turned on her, decided to try a different tactic. She found me in the sunroom, folding laundry. She closed the door and put on a smile that was almost painful to look at. "Mum," she said, her voice dripping with fake honey. "Mark and I have been thinking, this whole legal mess, it is hurting the family. We found a beautiful apartment in the city. Luxury. We want to give you a suite there. Private. Safe." She sat down next to me, taking my hand. I suppressed the urge to recoil. "We will give you a lifetime allowance," she continued. $2,000 a month. All cash. You just have to withdraw the complaints. Tell the lawyer it was a misunderstanding." I looked at her, widening my eyes to look frail and confused. I reached into my pocket and silently pressed the record button on the cheap phone Lucas gave me. "But Savannah," I said, making my voice wobble. "If the bank takes this house, how will you pay me? Where is the money coming from?" Savannah rolled her eyes, her patience fraying instantly. "Oh, don't worry about the bank. Mark and I have accounts they don't know about. We moved the money months ago. We have plenty. Just sign the papers." "Okay. I will think about it, I stammered. As soon as she left the room, I saved the recording. We moved the money months ago. It was a confession of bankruptcy fraud. Claire called me that evening. "Do not sign anything," she said, her voice sounding satisfied. "We wait for the auction. The bank has rejected their restructuring plan. The house goes on the block in 14 days. The trust is ready. And the best part, Mark and Savannah have no idea that Briggs Legacy Holdings is actually you." The fallout was swift. Savannah stopped posting. Her Instagram feed, usually a barrage of consumption and bragging, went dead silent. A teeth-whitening brand released a statement distancing themselves from her due to pending financial investigations. The rich wife persona was cracking like cheap plaster. That night, the house was quiet. Mark and Savannah were locked in their bedroom, arguing in hushed, desperate tones. I walked into the kitchen. It was dark, illuminated only by the moonlight filtering through the high windows. For the first time in 3 years, the room was empty. No cameras blinking. I had disabled the Wi-Fi router an hour ago just to be petty. No Savannah screaming about her space. I ran my hand over the cold, smooth quartz of the island. I traced the edge of the sink where I had washed thousands of dishes. "They think they are negotiating a surrender," I whispered to the empty room. "They do not know I am just waiting for the keys." I looked at the stove, the one I was forbidden to touch. "Soon," I promised myself. "Soon I will cook my first meal here without asking anyone for permission." The official foreclosure notice was taped to the front door on a rainy Tuesday. It was a bright orange sticker that screamed failure to the entire neighborhood. Inside, the house descended into a chaotic purgatory of cardboard boxes and screaming matches. Mark spent his nights pacing the hallway, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice climbing an octave with every rejection. I listened from the top of the stairs as he begged his former business partners for a lifeline. "Dave, listen. It is just a liquidity issue," Mark pleaded into the receiver, his hand shaking. "I need just a bridge loan. 50,000. I can pay you back in a month." There was a silence on the other end, followed by a click. Mark threw the phone against the wall. He did not know that the rumors of the elder abuse investigation had turned him into a pariah. No one wanted to lend money to a man suspected of trying to kill his mother for insurance money. In the kitchen, Savannah was aggressively wrapping her collection of imported copper pots in bubble wrap. She slammed a heavy skillet into a box, muttering under her breath. "That old parasite," she hissed to herself, unaware I was standing in the doorway. "She ruins everything. If she had just died, we would be fine. Now I have to pack my kitchen." She sealed the box with violent rips of packing tape. She had no idea that she was essentially packing those pots for me. The day of the auction arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. The sale took place in a small, windowless conference room at the downtown bank branch. I was not in the room. Claire had arranged for us to sit in an adjacent viewing office, watching the proceedings on a closed-circuit monitor. My hands were cold. I clasped them together to stop the trembling. "Breathe." "Eleanor?" Claire said, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Trust the math." On the screen, 5 men in suits sat around a table. One of them was a representative from Briggs Legacy Holdings, the blind trust Claire had set up. It was a petty, delicious name. The auctioneer, a bored-looking man with a monotone voice, started the bidding. Opening bid at $800,000? He droned. $850. A man in a grey suit said. He was a property flipper. I knew the type. He would buy it, paint everything white, and sell it for double. 900,000. Another voice chimed in. My heart hammered against my ribs. The numbers were climbing fast. Too fast. $1 million, the flipper said. I looked at Claire. That is too high. We cannot go much higher. Wait, Claire said, her voice steady. He is bluffing. He doesn't have the margin for more. 1,100,000, our representative said calmly. The room went silent. The flipper tapped his pen on the table. He looked at his spreadsheet. He shook his head and closed his folder. Going once, the auctioneer said. Going twice. Sold to Briggs Legacy Holdings for $1,100,000. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 years. The gavel hit the wood block with a sound that felt like a judge's sentence. But for the first time, I was not the one on trial. 30 minutes later, the paperwork was signed. I owned the house. I owned the stairs. I owned the kitchen. Mark and Savannah received the call from the bank's lawyer while I was sitting in Claire's car, parked down the street from the house. We watched through the rain-streaked window. The front door flew open. Savannah stormed out onto the porch, clutching a piece of paper. She ripped it into shreds and threw it into the wet wind. She turned back to Mark, who was standing in the doorway looking like a ghost. "This is your fault," she screamed, her voice carrying over the sound of the rain. "You and your useless mother that bitch cost us everything we have 30 days. Mark, 30 days. I watched her scream. I watched her point a finger at the empty street, blaming the world, blaming me. She thought she was shouting at a helpless old woman who was cowering in a guest room. She did not know she was screaming at her landlord. 30 days? I whispered to the glass, a small, cold smile touching my lips. Start packing. Savannah. The 30 days of grace the bank had granted them evaporated like water on a hot stove. On the final morning, the front door stood open to the grey afternoon. The driveway was cluttered with hasty piles of boxes and black garbage bags that burst at the seams. Inside, the air smelled of panic and dust. Mark and Savannah were frantic, taping up the last of the crystal vases. When the doorbell rang, it was not a polite chime, it was a summons. Mark stomped to the door, wiping sweat from his forehead with the sleeve of his wrinkled shirt. "We are leaving," he shouted before he even saw who it was. "You cannot just kick us out before noon, we have rights." He pulled the door open and froze. I stood there on the porch. I was wearing my old beige trench coat, the one Savannah had tried to throw away 3 times. Beside me stood Claire, looking sharp enough to cut glass in her navy suit, and a man from the bank holding a clipboard. "Mark," I said. My voice was steady. "Mum." Mark blinked, looking past me to the bank official. "What is she doing here?" "We are busy." "Mom, I cannot deal with you right now." The bank representative stepped forward. He adjusted his glasses and looked at Mark with professional indifference. "Mr. Briggs," the man said. "I am here to facilitate the key handover. I would like to introduce you to the new owner of the property, representing Briggs Legacy Holdings." He gestured to me. "Mrs. Eleanor Briggs." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Mark's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a man who had been slapped by a ghost. Savannah appeared behind him, holding a box of spices. She dropped it. The glass jars shattered against the hardwood, sending a cloud of paprika and cumin into the air. "That is impossible," she shrieked, her face twisting into something ugly. "She is broke. She is a leech. There is no way she has money." Claire stepped forward, holding a folder thick with documents. "Actually," Claire said, her voice cool and crisp, "Eleanor has always had money. Specifically, the money she lent Mark 20 years ago, the money he never paid back. We exercised the lien clause on the original loan. Combine that with her savings and the settlement from her husband's death that she has been protecting from your fraud, and she bought the house." Savannah lunged forward, but Mark grabbed her arm. She was shaking. You stole our house." "I did not steal anything," I said, stepping across the threshold. I walked past them. My footsteps echoed on the floor I had scrubbed on my hands and knees. I walked straight to the kitchen. It was messy, cluttered with packing materials, but the bones of it were still beautiful. I stopped at the edge of the white marble island. Savannah was standing near the sink, her arms wrapped around a box filled with the designer cookware she loved more than she loved people. I looked her in the eye. "You once told me this was your kitchen," I said, my voice low but carrying through the empty room. "You told me never to touch it. Now, I am returning the favor. Please, do not touch my kitchen anymore." Savannah made a sound like a wounded animal. Mark stumbled into the room. He looked at me, and then at the walls. Realizing the trap had closed, he fell to his knees, literally. Mom, please," he stammered, tears leaking from his eyes. "I didn't. I was just influenced by her. It was Savannah. She made me do it. I am your son." I looked down at him. I felt a pang of old love, but it was buried under layers of scar tissue. "Get up, Mark," I said. "You signed the papers. You moved the money. You watched me fall down those stairs and you worried about the insurance payout before you worried about my neck." "I am sorry," he wailed. "I will fix it. Let us stay. I will take care of you. I am not sending you to prison." "Mark," I said. "The insurance investigators will decide that part, but my wallet is closed. Forever. If you want to fix your life, you go find a lawyer and a job, but you will not do it on my back." Savannah pushed Mark aside. Her eyes were desperate, calculating. "Wait. Eleanor, listen. We can make a deal. I will sign a non-disclosure agreement. I will not tell the press about the family mess. Just give us $50,000 for a fresh start." I laughed. It was a dry, raspy sound. "Silence?" I asked. "Silence is what nearly cost me my life. I am not buying that product anymore." At that moment, a car pulled up outside. Haley, Savannah's assistant, walked up the path. She did not look at Savannah. She walked straight to Claire and handed her a thick envelope. "Here are the rest of the offshore account statements, Ms. Morton," Haley said. Savannah looked at Haley and then at the floor. She realized finally that she was completely alone. 10 minutes later, I stood at the kitchen window. I watched Savannah drag the last heavy box to their leased moving truck. She paused and looked back at the house. Her eyes met mine through the glass. There was no defiance left, only the hollow shock of defeat. They drove away. The engine faded into the distance. The house was silent. It was a good silence. The refrigerator hummed. There was a soft knock on the open front door. I turned. Standing there was Lila, my granddaughter. She was 16, with Mark's eyes but Thomas's gentle chin. She had her backpack over one shoulder. She had taken an Uber here from school, ignoring her parents' texts. "Grandma?" she asked, her voice small. Dad said we are not allowed here anymore." "He isn't," I said. "You are." Lila walked into the kitchen. She looked at the empty counters. She looked at me. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I am better than okay," I said. Lila hesitated, then put her bag down. Can I help you make dinner? I am starving." I smiled. It was the first real smile I had felt in years. I reached into the drawer and pulled out my old, stained, floral apron. I handed it to her. "Wash your hands," I said. "We are making stew." I watched her turn on the tap. I realized then that I did not take this house to destroy a family. I took it back so I could finally choose who was worthy to stand in this kitchen with me. Thanks so much for listening to my story. Drop a comment below telling me where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button so this story can reach even more people.